Welcome back, podcast friends. And today's episode is a part two of my two-part series of medication misdirection. Last week, I talked about the diabetic medication misdirection, and this week, I'm going to talk about the cholesterol medication misdirection. And the main reason is because the way the medical community looks at people is they want to tell everybody that if you want to be healthy and maintain your health, you must be on a medication. Now, the other thing that the medical community, drug companies, is when I say that, I'm not talking about your physicians. Your physicians don't know this. I have been a doctor of pharmacy 35 years, practiced in a hospital setting. Never did I hear any of this. I didn't know this stuff. So this is not your physician's fault. We are all being hoodwinked. But the medical community, the drug companies used to think a patient cured is a customer lost. But now it's gotten even worse because now they say, how can we make more patients? And if you listen to my last podcast, you'll already see how we've made more patients by giving them diabetic medications. We actually make diabetes worse. And you can tell by looking at the numbers, our diabetic medications, our diabetic patients, everything is going through the roof year after year. We are not curing anything. We are actually making things worse. So to start off, I want to explain to you what's actually going on. When you look at our bodies, the way our bodies are made out of protein, out of fat, vitamins, minerals, cholesterol, and water. These are all vital nutrients. Our body has to have these in order to live. Protein, the basic building block of protein, is amino acids. And if you take all the protein out of all the plants and all the animals, there's only 20 different amino acids. Think of them like little building blocks. But of those 20 amino acids, our body can put these amino acids together in different ways to make up over 20,000 different proteins. And some of these proteins have over 27,000 amino acids long. So we need lots and lots of protein. The other thing is fat, fatty acids, and cholesterol. This is vital. We have to have this. As far as fatty acid is the basic building block of all fats. So amino acids, basic building block of protein, fatty acids, basic building block of fat. And of those, first of the amino acids, there's 9 essential amino acids, meaning your body doesn't make them. You have to get them from the food you eat. So you have to get amino acids so you can get these 9 essential amino acids. With the fat, there's 2 essential fatty acids, omega-6 and omega-3. You have to eat fat in order to get these omega-6 and omega-3. And I'll explain omega-6 and omega-3 in just a little bit. But so that's what we need. We have to have amino acids. We have to have fatty acids. We have vitamins, minerals, cholesterol, and water. What we do not need is glucose. We do not need carbohydrates. A carbohydrate is anything that comes from a plant-based food. And I'm not talking about God-made plants with the fruits and vegetables, although yes, they are made out of carbohydrates. That is true. The carbohydrates, the plants that grow below the ground that have starch in them, those are long chains of glucose. So there's a lot of glucose in those. So if you have a problem with glucose, you might want to avoid the plants that grow below the ground, like potatoes. Stick to the plants that grow above the ground if you want plants at all. And fruit, just be very careful. All plants have phytotoxins. They all have toxins. Plants don't want you to eat them until it's a certain time, or they don't want you eating them at all. So there are toxins in these plants. But you can cook them and there's ways of getting the toxins out of it. But fruit, be careful because fruit will fatten you up. Okay. Fructose gets turned straight into fat. Think of how a bear, what he does right before hibernation. He goes around and starts eating all these berries because all these berries have fructose. Fructose gets turned immediately into triglycerides and fat, and that fattens a bear up for hibernation. It does the same thing to us. Be aware, and only eat your fruits and vegetables when they are seasonally growing. If they are not actually growing at that time of year, you should not be eating them because that means that you have a totally genetically modified plant that has all kinds of chemicals and toxins in it. And also think of grains. If you're talking about cattle, and I'll talk about this another way, but so that's one thing you can think about. Think of how bears fatten themselves up for hibernation. It's by eating carbohydrates. First, what I want you to realize is we do not need carbohydrates. We do not need glucose. Our body is not made out of glucose. We do have glucose stores, as I talked about in the last podcast, but it's only 10% of our liver, not very much, about 400 calories. And 1% of each skeletal muscle has glucose just for that one skeletal muscle. And if you take all the glucose stores, it only comes to about 2,400 calories. To where when you think of fat, 1 pound of fat has 4,000 calories. You have more calories in 1 pound of fat than you do all your glucose stores. That's actually a good thing. The drug companies try to make you think that's bad because you eat fat because there's so many calories in it. This is not about calories. This is about the calorie source. When you use glucose for your calorie source, you raise your insulin levels and you force your body to store fat, to stuff fat in your fat cells. When you use fat for your energy source, you keep your insulin levels low and you constantly burn the fat out of your fat stores. So it is not about calories. The only reason I bring up calories is to let you realize if God was when God made us, but if he was making us to be able to go for a couple of days, 2-3 days without being able to eat anything, there's no way he is expecting us to use our glucose for our energy stores. We would die. That's why we have the fat stores on board, and that's how we should be using it. We should fill our fat cells, then burn it, then fill it, then burn it. And that's not what we do anymore. We continuously eat glucose all through the day, and we do nothing but stuff all our fat cells. We do not need glucose. You don't ever have to put a plant-based food in your mouth and you'll be perfectly fine. But the main thing we're worried about is all the man-made food with all the sugar and high fructose corn syrup and flour, which is just powdered glucose. That's all that is. And then all the toxic chemicals in these seed oils. Our man-made food is killing us. Avoid that at all costs because the cost is your life. I realized since I worked in the hospital, I saw all these huge obese patients who were so sick, so inflamed. They're at their wits' end and they're on more medications than you would believe. Sacks full of bottles of medications these people are on. I understand that since you're not in that area, you may not realize how much medications people are on, but it is a lot. And they want to continue putting people on more and more medications because that's how the drug companies make their money. So let's get into the first medication misdirection. When you're talking about cholesterol, what the drug companies have taught the medical community is that you have to look at your LDL levels. If you have a high LDL level, boy, we better get this down with a statin. And even if you don't have a high LDL level, we've got to get it down with a statin. Everybody needs to be on a statin. That's what the medical community says. So I want to explain to you why statins are lethal, killing every single cell in your body for no positive effect at all, because it's never been shown that whether your LDL levels are high or low makes no difference whatsoever. There are people walking around extremely healthy, fine specimens of human being that may have their LDL levels up around 300, and they are doing perfectly fine because LDLs are normal, has nothing to do with it, and that's what I'm going to try to explain. The first medication misdirection, they have you looking at the LDL levels. What you should be looking at is your triglyceride level and your HDL levels. And I'll explain that at the end of this podcast, exactly what you need to be looking at when you get your cholesterol panel. But first, just so you know what we're talking about triglycerides and we're talking about cholesterol. Triglycerides, to know what a triglyceride is, this is picture a big capital E. So you have the vertical backbone, and that's made out of glycerol. And then you have the 3 horizontal portions, and each of those are fatty acids. The triglyceride is the form of fat that your body turns all glucose that you eat, goes to the liver, and insulin tells your liver to turn all that glucose into triglycerides. Then the body has to take those triglycerides, take it around the body to a fat cell, and then insulin tells the body, it forces the body, if you have a high insulin level, it forces the body to take those triglycerides and put that into the fat cell and store it. When you have high insulin levels, that's all you can do is store fat. You cannot burn it. When your insulin level is low, you'll burn the fat out of your fat cells. So the key is keep your insulin levels low. The way you keep your insulin levels low is keep glucose out of your mouth. That's basically, which means be very careful of no man-made products and be very careful of the plant-based products that you eat. So that's a triglyceride. And I'll explain how all this goes together. The other thing is cholesterol. Cholesterol it's not really a fat. If you look at the chemical structure of fat, it's a straight line. It's a bunch of carbons and hydrogens, straight chain. Cholesterol has rings. There's 3 rings that make up a cholesterol molecule. And cholesterol is vital to life. So I'll explain why that's vital. We have to have cholesterol. It is so important that our liver makes 80% of all the cholesterol that our body uses. Every single cell in our body makes cholesterol, that every single cell that has a nucleus. So all the cells except for red blood cells, every single cell in our body makes cholesterol, and every single cell in our body needs cholesterol to live. They have to have it. If they do not have it, they will die. And that's exactly what's happening when we put people on these statins. So I want to explain to you exactly what's going on. Because what happens is you have this glucose, you're making all this glucose, it goes down to the liver turns that into triglycerides. So again, like I said, the liver makes 80% of all the cholesterol for your body, and it's making all these triglycerides because of all the glucose that you keep eating. So you've got all this cholesterol and you have the triglycerides in your liver. So your liver needs to get that out of the liver and circulate around to the body so it can deposit all this cholesterol and all these triglycerides to all the numerous places where fat and cholesterol are vital to our life. So when it does that inside the liver, it takes a protein shell. I call them fat mobiles, just so people don't get confused. But picture like a cargo ship or a semi truck, and it's carrying the cargo, and the cargo is cholesterol and triglycerides. This is perfectly normal. So it leaves the liver, this fat mobile leaves the liver as a VLDL, a very low density lipoprotein. It leaves the liver that way, and it starts going around the body and delivering all of its cargo out to all the places that need fat and all the places that need cholesterol, which are lots of places. We'll talk about it. And as it does, these fat mobiles, they start shrinking because they're getting rid of the cargo. As they shrink, it goes from a very low density lipoprotein, a VLDL, to an intermediate density lipoprotein, an IDL. And then it keeps on giving away fat, cholesterol, triglycerides, and cholesterol till it shrinks down to an LDL. That's a low density lipoprotein. So now the LDL will give a little bit more triglycerides, a little bit more cholesterol, but then the LDL, under normal situations, the way God made us and the way we've been doing this for centuries, is the LDL will go back to the liver. The liver will take that LDL back up, put more cholesterol and triglycerides inside, and it swells it back up to a VLDL again, and then sends it back on its way and just keeps cycling. The problem comes when we continue to eat glucose, all man-made food and nothing but plants, and we're avoiding the animal-based food, which is actually what's keeping us healthy. When you do that, you are bombarding your body with glucose, okay? Your body is trying to do all it can with all this glucose that you're pouring in it, just like I talked about in the last podcast. What your body ends up doing is turning all this glucose into triglycerides in the liver. So when you're eating all this glucose and you have all these triglycerides, when you make that VLDL, when you make that fat mobile within your liver, there's so many triglycerides because of what you're eating that you end up sitting in that with just a little bit of cholesterol and a ton of triglycerides. The reason why that's important is because now when this VLDL, this fat mobile, leaves the liver with way more triglycerides than it normally does and less cholesterol, as it circulates around the body and it gives all these triglycerides up, remember, it shrinks down to an IDL, but in normal situations, that's called a large buoyant LDL. That's the one that's normal, that goes back to the liver and gets turned back into a VLDL. When that VLDL leaves that liver with way more triglycerides and a little bit of cholesterol, as it shrinks down, it goes past that large buoyant LDL. It gives up more triglycerides. And as it shrinks, there wasn't as much cholesterol in there to begin with, so this becomes a small, dense LDL. Okay, so the large buoyant LDL, perfectly normal, goes back to the liver to get fattened back up to VLDL. Small, dense LDL, when that goes to the liver, because of the size of it, it doesn't fit the receptor on the liver, so the liver doesn't take it up. So that means that this small, dense LDL sits out and circulates in the bloodstream for a lot longer. As this small, dense LDL, as this circulates around, remember, what's making this is because you're eating glucose, okay? Glucose is the basic building block of all plant-based foods, and they just slather all the man-made foods with glucose and fructose because they want to get you addicted. So all this stuff, you end up with this small, dense LDL. You have a bunch of glucose in your blood, and as I talked about in the last podcast, anytime you have glucose in the blood, it binds to proteins called glycation, and it deteriorates those proteins. This small, dense LDL is a small, dense lipoprotein. Just like with all the other proteins in your body, glucose attaches to that, glycates it, and it makes it where it's damaged. The other thing, when you're eating all this man-made food, you're putting a ton of inflammatory mediators in your body because it's nothing but sugar, fructose, and seed oils, which are nothing but chemicals. So that's man-made food is chemical-based foods. There's animal-based foods, plant-based foods. That's all God-made food. Then there's man-made food, which is chemical-based, and that's what's causing all our damage, including inflammation. So now you have a small dense LDL that's been glycated from the glucose in your blood. Now it's being inflamed from all the inflammation in your blood. The other thing, when you eat fat, when you use fat for your energy source, as your body breaks down the fat to make the energy, the ATP, the only thing left is carbon dioxide, which you breathe out, and water, which you can pee out. When you use glucose for your energy source to make ATP, you get the same carbon dioxide and the same water, but you also get what's called reactive oxygen species, these free radicals that are floating around in your body, also causing damage. That's why everybody's talking about taking these antioxidants. You need all these antioxidants because you're using glucose for an energy source that's causing all this. Plus all the chemicals that are invading our body, these also cause these reactive oxygen species. So now you have this small, dense LDL. It's been glycated, it's been inflamed, it's been oxidized. And there's one last piece. On the inside of all your blood vessels, there's like a velvet lining that lines the inside of it. It's called the glycocalyx. The glycocalyx has these little, like velvet, it has these little hair-like fingers that stick out into the lumen of the blood vessel. And that's what keeps things in the blood vessel so it doesn't get out into the lumen. However, it has been found that when you eat a high carbohydrate meal, about for the next 6 hours after you eat it, that kind of shrivels those hairs down on that glycocalyx. So it makes it where it's not defending the blood vessels as well. If you eat carbohydrates for your main energy, you are going to be starving in the next 2, 3, 4 hours because there's no nutrients in there. And all it is, it makes it where your body you don't sense the hunger signals or the satiety centers that make you feel full when you're eating that kind of food. So now, and usually within 6 hours, somebody eats another carbohydrate. And so it keeps that glycocalyx down. So let's go back again. You have this small, dense LDL that was made from having too many triglycerides to start off with. Now it's floating around your blood for a lot longer because it won't be taken up by the liver. It's been glycated, it's been inflamed, it's been oxidized, and now the glycocalyx is torn up. So now this small, dense LDL buries itself into our blood vessels. Now our body realizes, hey, there's a foreign intruder in my blood vessel, so it sends out its army. That's what our inflammation system is. And inflammation is good. That's how we take care of things like this, like thorns in our foot or a broken bone or pneumonia, anything that's inflamed. Our body sends out this inflammation, these white blood cells, and it takes care of it. It's doing the same thing with these small, dense LDLs that have buried its way into the blood vessels. And when it does, it starts sending enzymes to eat this up. But when you continue to eat this way and continue to make these small, dense LDLs, you're continuously bombarding your blood vessels. Your body is trying to fight. And as it does, it releases enzyme that actually starts tearing the blood vessels up. And this is when you get these fat, airy cells called foam cells that kind of stick out in the blood vessel, just like a rock that jetties out in a river as you're canoeing by. And as it does, you get swirling of the blood, and this is when you get increased blood clot formation and also decreased perfusion to your end organs, so you're not getting oxygen there. That is what causes cardiovascular disease. That's what causes all the disease we're seeing. It tears up all your small blood vessels. At first, that's where you see the normal things like with diabetes, you get the retinopathy, the nephropathy, and the neuropathy. That's eye problems, kidney problems, and nerve problems. And this because those are the small blood vessels getting damaged. But when you keep eating like this, you keep tearing up your blood vessels. Now you're damaging the large blood vessels. And that's when you get all the liver damage, the pancreatic damage, the brain damage, the kidney damage. All the damages that we see, Alzheimer's, the dementia, everything that we're seeing is because we are killing ourselves by eating all this stuff that we're eating from the man-made products. That is what's causing cardiovascular disease. It is not high LDL levels. Now, as far as the types of fat that we have, remember we were talking about the essential fatty acids, there's omega-6 and omega-3. This is why seed oils are so toxic, so inflammatory, because your omega-6 fatty acids, they get turned into inflammatory prostaglandins in your body. And you need that. We just talked about how you need inflammation, but you need to keep it under control. So omega-3s, they get turned into anti-inflammatory prostaglandins. So you want a good balance of inflammatory prostaglandins, omega-6, and anti-inflammatory prostaglandins, omega-3s. And a good ratio would be like 3 of the inflammatory to 1 of the anti-inflammatory, or maybe 7 of the inflammatory to 1 of the anti-inflammatory. And that's about what you get. When you have a grass-fed, grass-finished beef, that's about a 3 to 1 of your omega-6 to omega-3, your inflammatory to your anti-inflammatory. When you have a grass-fed, grain-finished beef, that's when you have a ratio of about 7 to 1, 7 of the inflammatory to 1 of the anti-inflammatory. So think about this. If you didn't realize, that's how the food system fattens up their cows to send them to slaughter. They fatten them by giving them grains. You want about a 3 to 7. When they tested these seed oils, first, to get the seed oils, they grow them, all these things like corn, soy, and wheat are the main ones that we grow for our food company. That's the main ones our government gives money to, because the food companies are making their food out of this stuff. They monocrop it, so they just have these things just growing by themselves. They crop dust these things with insecticides, pesticides, fungicides, herbicides, all this glyphosate. And this stuff does get inside the food. It does get inside the seeds. So all that's extremely inflammatory, all those chemicals. But then they take those and they put them in a chemical plant to make these seed oils. Then they subject them to high pressures, high temperatures, petrochemical solvents, bleaching agents, and they stink so bad. The people who work on these lines and these seed oil manufacturing plants, they say it reeks so bad they have to wear respirators to keep the smell down. So they also have put deodorizing agents in these as well. So it's chemical after chemical. Plus, when they looked at their omega-6 to omega-3, remember a 3 to 1 to 7 to 1 is good. These seed oils have an omega-6 to omega-3 of around 20 to over 50 to 1. So you're bombarded with all this inflammatory prostaglandins and very tiny amount of anti-inflammatory. So there's all kinds of reasons why these seed oils are toxic and inflammatory to our bodies, and we need to avoid them. And if you ever go out to the restaurant and you eat something fried out there, they are using these seed oils. I guarantee it, because it's all chemical based, so it's dirt cheap for them. It's not dirt cheap for you, because now you're going to have to be spending hospitalizations, doctor bills, medications, everything else from eating this type of food. That's one thing. It has nothing to do whether it's saturated or unsaturated. That doesn't make it good or bad. It depends on all this inflammation. So there are some good saturated fats and bad saturated fats, good unsaturated and bad unsaturated. Unsaturated fat just means it's liquid at room temperature. Basically, that's not what it means, but unless I go into the chemical structure, you won't get it. So basically, polyunsaturated fats are liquid at room temperature, like all those toxic seed oils that you see on all over the grocery store shelves, with the corn oil, cottonseed oil, sunflower, canola, safflower, soybean, peanut. All those oils are so toxic. And then the bad saturated fats, okay, that are also bad would be like Crisco, okay, horrible toxic. And I've talked about that in past podcasts, how we even came up with Crisco. All these vegetable oils used to only be used in machinery. That's the only time they ever used those, until Procter and Gamble decided we could start telling everybody we could eat them. And then all the other companies fell in line, and now we're eating all these toxic seed oils. Good fats, there are good oils. There are good polyunsaturated fats, like extra virgin olive oil. These are the fruit fats. The seed oils, vegetable oils, those are toxic. But the fruit fats are fine. So extra virgin olive oil, okay, that's a polyunsaturated fat. It's liquid. Avocado oil, polyunsaturated. It's a liquid. Coconut oil, that's saturated. Okay, that's solid at room temperature. But all three of those, extra virgin olive oil, coconut oil, and avocado, those are fruit oils. Those are fine. Your animal fats, all your animal fats are great. So you've got pork fat, which is called lard. You have beef fat, which is called tallow. Then you have, and those are saturated fats, but then there's polyunsaturated fats like fish oil, which is extremely healthy for you, has lots of omega-3s. It's a great omega-3 source. And then you have the fat that's in whole milk and grass-fed cattle and real butter. And those are the fats you want. You want full fat when you're talking about animal fat, and you want zero fat when you're talking about vegetable and seed oils. So let's go on to cholesterol really quick. Cholesterol is a thing that is so vital because it's used in every single one of your cells. Every single cell in your body needs fat and needs cholesterol for the cell membrane. Cholesterol is a precursor to all your steroid hormones like testosterone, progesterone, estrogen. You don't have cholesterol or it's low, you're going to be low on that. You need cholesterol to form your bile salts, okay? And your bile salts are what's going to help digest the food that's in your stomach. If you don't have cholesterol, you don't have bile salts. It's also a precursor to vitamin D. We already know how important vitamin D is. And then we've already shown you that cholesterol is a vital part in your fat mobiles as well. It's cholesterol and triglycerides makes your fat mobiles. But cholesterol is so vital to your life that every single cell in your body makes cholesterol, and every single cell in your body needs cholesterol, and every single cell in your body has two different ways of getting cholesterol. It either makes it, or if it doesn't make enough, say it's trying to produce some more testosterone, if it doesn't have enough, it can put receptors on the outside. And as these fat mobiles go by, it'll attach it and pull the cholesterol in so the cell can live. And again, this isn't fat cells. This is every single cell in your body that needs this. The way this works is when your cell takes in cholesterol, when your cell needs cholesterol, there are things called isoprenoids. And these are all the things that your cell needs. Cholesterol is an isoprenoid. Coenzyme Q10 is an isoprenoid. Vitamin K is an isoprenoid. All these isoprenoids are things that the cell needs to live. If it does not have its isoprenoids, the cell dies. Okay, and cholesterol is just one of these isoprenoids. The way it works is if your body needs some of these isoprenoids, it produces a protein called reductase. When it produces reductase, it takes the food that we've eaten and it attaches to that reductase, and that makes a chemical reaction. From that chemical reaction within every single cell, with that chemical reaction forms a product called mevalonate. And that is huge because from mevalonate, it makes all these other isoprenoids that it needs. Like I said, cholesterol, coenzyme Q10, vitamin K, dolichols, all these things that a cell needs. So if it needs these, it starts producing all this reductase. But what happens when you take a statin comes up and the cell said, okay, I need some cholesterol, I need these isoprenoids. And now all of a sudden the statin invades your cell and it blocks that reductase. That's why it's called a reductase inhibitor. Once it blocks that reductase, that cell cannot make mevalonate. So that means it cannot make any of these isoprenoids that it needs. So remember I said a cell can either make its own cholesterol or put receptors on the side to get more cholesterol. Now we've just gummed up the way that it can make its own. So what it does is it puts receptors all around the outside of the cell to try to get whatever cholesterol is coming by in these fat mobiles so it can have more cholesterol. And that's exactly what they've seen with these statins, that when people are put on statins, they look at the intracellular reductase levels and they're way elevated. So they can tell this cell is, whoa, I don't have my isoprenoids. I must need to make more reductase so I can get these. And I need to put more receptors on the outside of the cell. And that's what they've seen on statins is the intracellular reductase levels are extremely elevated. So yes, now it's taken and it's bringing the cholesterol in because it put more receptors. So you watch your blood LDL level go down because your cell is dying and it's trying to get the cholesterol in to live. So now it gets the cholesterol in, but the cell's sitting there thinking, wait a minute. Now I have cholesterol, but I don't have any my isoprenoids that I get from my mevalonate. And so the cell dies. And that's what statins are doing. They're killing every single one of the cells in your body. And depending on your genetics, it depends on which ones they kill, how many they kill, which organs are damaged. That's why a lot of them have dementia. They start having foggy brains. A lot of people having muscle pain. They can't hardly work. I just interviewed a guy that was started on a statin, and 2 months later, he couldn't even get out of bed. Okay. He was doing my last podcast. So this is no little thing. So your cells are dying. Yes, the LDL levels are coming down, but that brings up, is that important to bring the LDL level down? The way they found out about statins was way back in the 50s or before the 50s or 60s, they were studying a statin on how it kills cells, similar to how cancer does. So Japan was trying to figure out how cancer was killing these cells, and they had a statin as their model. A drug company in Texas found out about this. They said, hey, look, these guys are working on this drug that's making your blood LDL level go down. We ought to tell everybody that LDLs are bad, and we can give them all these statins. And they have. They make trillions of dollars off statins for no reason whatsoever. So it's just because the cell's dying. So what do you really need to look at when you get your cholesterol panel? They found out that it doesn't matter whether your LDLs are high or low. All the studies show it doesn't matter whether it's high or low. What does matter is if you have high triglycerides and low HDLs, your good cholesterol, you are at a cardiovascular risk and also a risk for all the organs in your body. But if you turn that around and you have low triglycerides and high HDLs, now that's cardioprotective. It makes no difference what your LDLs are doing, high or low. That's what matters, the triglycerides and your LDL level. So the key is keep your triglycerides low and your HDLs high. So how do you do that? The way you keep your triglycerides low is you quit eating glucose. So you quit eating all man-made Franken food that's full of sugar and high fructose corn syrup and flour and toxic seed oils. Stay away from the things in box, bottle, bag, and can. But even your plants, you're going to need to be careful on what you eat. Again, be careful of the starches, because the more glucose you eat, and glucose is the basic building block of all plant-based foods and everything in the man-made food. So that's how you can decrease your triglycerides. The way you increase your HDLs, there's only been two ways that I've seen in the studies that show how HDLs can go up. That's by lifting heavy things, resistance training, making more muscles, and eating fat and cholesterol. Because your VLDLs, your fat mobiles, those are made in the liver, but your HDLs, your high density lipoproteins, those are actually made in the gut. And they found that when you eat fat and cholesterol, those HDLs increase in number. So that's how you increase your HDLs. And when your HDLs are high, that's more cardioprotective. So what you want to look at when you get to cholesterol panel is look at triglyceride level, your HDL level, and your total cholesterol level. If you take your triglyceride level, divide by your HDL level, you want that to be less than 2, and really preferably 1 to 1. So another way of saying that is you want to make sure that your triglycerides are no higher than twice your HDLs. And again, you'd rather have 1 to 1. Like my wife and I, our HDL level is actually higher than our triglyceride level. Now, the other thing you want to do is take your total cholesterol. Oh, when you take your triglycerides divided by your HDLs, you want that 2, less than 2, and preferably 1 to 1. Then you can take your total cholesterol, divide that by your HDLs, and you want that level to be less than 5 and preferably less than 3.5. The studies have shown that if your ratio of triglycerides to HDLs are above 2, or your total cholesterol divided by your HDLs are greater than 5, this is indicative. This indicative that you have a lot more of those small, dense LDLs. If your ratios are low, like I said would be good, that's indicative that you do not have all these small, dense LDLs, and you have just your regular large point LDLs that are perfectly vital to life and perfectly normal. Okay. So when you get your cholesterol check, do not look at LDL levels, only look at triglycerides, HDLs, and total cholesterols, and run it through the formulas that I just told you. Triglycerides divided by HDLs or total cholesterol divided by HDLs. And now you know how to decrease triglycerides and you know how to increase the HDLs. That's how you're going to be cardioprotective. Do not think that statins are protecting you in any way. The key to all this, stop eating sugar and flour. Stop eating these inflammatory seed oils. Prioritize your protein. You need protein. If you don't eat it, your body's going to get it from your muscles. So you may see your weight go down, but your muscles going down, and you do not want to lose your muscle mass as you get older. So prioritize your protein. Don't fear fat and cholesterol. Fat and cholesterol are vital. They're vital to our health. We have to have fat and cholesterol, but make sure it's a good fat and not these toxic fats that we just talked about. And then the other one, just control your carbs. Avoid all man-made food, everything in the box, bottle, bag, and can. But if you're having trouble with carbohydrates, you might want to stay away from the ones that grow below the ground because that's starch, long glucose chain. You might want to stay away from a lot of fruits. That's fructose. That's how bears fatten themselves up for hibernation. Stay away from the grains. That's how we fatten cows up for slaughter. Just control your carbs. I'm not saying don't eat them, but it's going to be up to your health status as far as how much and which ones you're going to eat. But in general, you can stick with the plants that grow above the ground and you should be fine. Okay, I know that was long, but I really wanted you to understand what was going on and how we're being duped by the drug companies and how they might want to take our eyes off the ball. They want us looking at one thing, like in the last one is A1C and weight loss, when really we should be looking at insulin levels and fat loss. And here they're having you look at your LDL level, when really we should be looking at our triglyceride, our HDL level, and our total cholesterol level. That's what we should be looking at. Thank you so much for listening. And until next time, stay nourished and stay well. If you enjoyed this podcast, please hit the subscribe button below and be sure to tell someone else who may want to change their health path as well. And remember, if you would like to enroll in our new online Thrive Naturally Transformation course to help you reach your new improved health goal, to reverse type 2 diabetes, feel great, and get off medications, we are here to help. Just go to our website, drstevehewlett.com, and click on the Work With Us tab at the top of the page. We truly are here to help you get off medications and start living the vibrant, pain-free life that you would love to live.